Thanks for joining me on episode 395 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Jeff Brown from the Read to Lead podcast, challenging you to reach true success in business and in life through consistent and intentional reading. One way to be inspired to success is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, with my friend Scott Mader.
See, it's not just about the amount, and it's not just about expenses. It's also about income. When you're looking to balance your budget, you have to remember there's two sides to the budget. There's outgo and income, and you got to work on both. It's not enough to just cut coffee out of your life. You also have to do things to bring more in and to then use that to serve more people and to continue to grow your influence and your impact.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about impacting the world through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about being faithful in the little things when it comes to money, why this isn't that so-called latte factor, and why it's not just about the amount, it's about the focus.
As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon.
In Monday's episode with Dow, you heard Dow reference this idea of being faithful with the little things to be trusted with much. But as you think about that passage, and most of us, whether you're a big-time Bible reader or you've just gone to the church every once in a while, you've probably heard that phrase, even just in popular culture. Be faithful with the little things to be trusted with much. But I think it's important to actually look at the story where that passage comes from, where that quote comes from in the Bible. Look at the story where that verse is and kind of look at the context as we think about what that truly means to be faithful in the little things when it comes to money and when it comes to other things as well. So I'm going to paraphrase here, but this is from Luke chapter 16. And basically there's a story, and you'll hear it called different things, but the parable of the shrewd manager is sometimes what you'll hear it called. I've also heard it called the parable or the story of the dishonest manager. And that may sound a little more interesting. Why would we tell a story of a dishonest manager in the Bible? And this is actually a parable or a story Jesus is telling his disciples. And he talks about this rich man who had a manager, and the manager is accused of wasting the rich man's possessions. In other words, this guy is rich enough that he's hired someone to take care of his stuff. Think of it as this guy has a money guy, who's going to take care of his money for him. But rumor has it that this money guy is dishonest. He's doing something against the rules. He's actually spending some of the money on himself or doing other things that are wasteful with the money, that aren't taking the best care of the manager and his stuff. And so the manager, the rich guy, calls the manager in and says to him, "What is this I hear about you? You need to give an account of your management to me because you cannot be my manager any longer." In other words, he basically is saying, show me the books. Show me what you've been up to. Now, at one thing here is if the manager hadn't actually been doing anything wrong, then it would have been very easy for him to at this point just say, well, fine, here, look at this. See what I've been doing? Everything is on the up and up. But instead, the story goes on and says that the manager thinks to himself, oh my Lord, what should I do now? My master is taking away my job, but I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I'm not going to go out and do anything manual labor-wise, and I'm not going to go just throw myself on the mercy of people and ask for help that way. I know what I'll do. I'll do something so that when I lose my job here, other people will welcome me in. Other people will invite me in. I'll do something that will build a relationship at some level, or at least a quid pro quo where someone will pay me back. So he goes to everyone that owes his master money. And he says, how much do you owe me? How much do you owe the master, rather? And the first one says, I owe him 900 gallons of olive oil for, whatever. I owe him $1,000, whatever it is, $10,000, $1 million. And the manager says, don't worry about it. Take out the bill, sit down, and cut it in half. Instead of $1,000, 500. And then he goes to the next guy. How much do you owe? He says, $10,000. He says, great, take it out your bill and make it 8,000 instead of 10,000. And he does this repeatedly with all of the folks that owe the master money. And then the master, here's the weird part of the story. Here's the part of the story that's never made a lot of sense to me, and I've struggled with it for a long time. The master then calls this dishonest manager in, the one who's been going and cutting all these deals behind his back. And he says, you're acting shrewd. You're being wise. Because the people in this world are shrewd with dealing with their own kind, with other people in the world, more than with the people of the light, more than people who are followers of God are. And using your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself so that when you're gone, you will be welcomed into the eternal. In other words, he almost seems to be saying, good job. Kind of makes your head spin a little bit. And then he goes on, and this is where he says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, then who will trust you with true riches, spiritual wealth? And if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's stuff, you as a manager haven't been trustworthy with mine, the master's stuff, then who will give you property of your own? And then it ends with, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And then it ends with the Pharisees who loved money, heard all of this, and were sneering at Jesus. And he said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. So this whole passage put together is used by a lot of people to justify the concept that Christians should never have any money. That this is another one of those things that basically, to a lot of people, means that it's saying that money is evil. Money is only of the world, and anything you do with money corrupts you. It makes you dirty. It's bad in some way, shape, or form. But I don't think this is really what it's saying. I think it's saying instead that you even have to be wise with the worldly things. After all, those things are given to you as a blessing by God. They really aren't yours anyway. You don't own them. God owns it all, remember? We've talked about this before. Instead of owning it, you're a manager. And you should be shrewd in your management. You shouldn't be going around doing something wrong. Obviously, this manager was doing something wrong in the first place. And that's why he has to scramble and do something to kind of save his rear end from being thrown out on the street. And in doing that, he even acts again dishonestly. He does something behind his owner's back. He does something that isn't really right. He forgives debts that aren't his to forgive. And that's a weird thing. It seems like he's being rewarded, but he really isn't. I think it's actually also saying that he can't be trusted with the little things. He can't be trusted with someone else's things. And that's why he's not going to be trusted with the spiritual things as well. See, his heart is in the wrong place. His focus is in the wrong place. A lot of times people will talk about this so-called latte factor. And some of you may be going, where is he going with this? How is this connected? The latte factor is this idea of if you don't stop at Starbucks every day, that $5 that you would have spent on Starbucks every day, because, really and truly Starbucks should be called $5, because that's what it costs you just to walk through the door, or at least it seems that way. That money that it kind of takes out of your hands, if you had invested it, if you'd done something wise with it, then you would end up retiring a millionaire. And there's some truth to that, in that there is truth on if you waste money, if you spend money on worldly things, if you spend money to be gratified today with money you don't really have, then you're not going to have money later when you need it. That's true. But the latte factor is not true, in that a lot of times what it does is it focuses you to focus only on expenses. It focuses you on only cutting out anything pleasurable out of my life. I want to get rid of everything that costs me money that might be fun, and I want to squeeze everything out of my money and out of my life so that I end up being able to retire really, really early, and I can go enjoy life and all of these sorts of things. But you don't enjoy life while you're on the path. And I don't think that's what we're called to do. I also don't think we're called to have no money. I think as Christians, it's perfectly okay for us to have money, as long as our heart and our focus is in the right place, and we're using the money, we're managing the money well for God's glory and the kingdom of God. We're doing what we're called to do with the money. We're not simply hoarding it and using it for ourselves. See, it's not just about the amount, and it's not just about expenses. It's also about income. When you're looking to balance your budget, you have to remember there's two sides to the budget. There's outgo and income, and you got to work on both. It's not enough to just cut coffee out of your life. You also have to do things to bring more in, and to then use that to serve more people and to continue to grow your influence and your impact on the world. And as you juggle these two sides, the idea is to keep the focus, however, in one place. To keep the focus on God and what God is calling you to do. And if you keep your eyes there and you draw that circle large and small, like we talked about earlier this week, if you're able to both look for ways to serve anyone and yet serve them in a very narrow, targeted way, then what you're going to find is you are being faithful with the little things. You are paying attention to the small things, and you are being a good steward of the things that you don't own, but that God has gifted you with. And as you do that, that circle will continue to grow, and you'll continue to expand, and you'll continue to draw the circle wider and wider and reach more and more, and you will be given more to be responsible for. You will be given more to steward. And that more doesn't necessarily mean more money either. It will be more of the spiritual gifts that you're called to do. And this focus is what allows you to be faithful with the little things so that you can be blessed with more. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the U.S. 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.